welcome everyone, welcome. We are here for the What's New in Patch session. One of the big new features in Jamf Pro 10, and we'll be very excited to learn everything that's possible with the new patch. So I'd like to turn over to John Miller, who is part of our product team. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So thanks everybody for coming and participating. We've been talking a lot about patch in the different sessions, both in the keynote in the beginning. We saw Dave Alampi talk through some of the new things, as well as in the What's New in Jamf Pro version 10 session that we had. So there's a couple different snippets, but I think this is gonna be, hopefully maybe not all things patch, but we can get through a lot of the different pieces and parts, talk through all of the new things that are there that you can start using in Jamf Pro version 10 and start using within your environment. So my name is John Miller. I have had the pleasure of working with Team Argonne, who's the team that is doing patch internally for about 3 or 4 months. I've been on the product team for a little while and excited to talk about the patch kind of overall process. So in different areas, you may have heard us talking about patch kind of in one of these. This is, all tool sets aside, patching software on managed Macs is in any stage of these 4 steps, right? So you have to identify what devices in your environment don't have the newest version, so to speak. You need to package that version. You have to upload that to be able to get distributed down to the devices, and then, of course, actually deploy that down to the devices with that kind of last apply stage. And really, that's a constant cycle and things that you always have to be doing. And in some ways, I'm probably preaching to the choir in a bit. You guys know that this is how this all works. So we introduced the first step in version 9.9.3 of the Casper suite, which did the identify piece. And so the identify piece really looked at the titles that we had from Jamf. And there's, at the time, I think we launched with 32 titles, and now we've got 42 different titles that we are monitoring. And when that is updated, we are deploying that down to and making it available for you in your patch feed to do that reporting step. And right now in your version of Jamf Pro, it says patch report in the left-hand nav, and you can kind of go through that. So a lot of the things that you guys are used to seeing, we'll kind of go through a little bit of a before and after for what version 10 brings to things you're already used to. So this is the patch report that shows in the title. You can see we're using Google Chrome as the example here, where we've got a couple of devices and none of them are up to date, but you can get a general gist of how the environment is looking specific to Google Chrome. How of the devices, what is the state of my devices against that? And you could add that to the dashboard if you wanted to see that a little bit more upfront. And if you wanted to do that for a new title, you could just go through and go into the computers, go into the patch itself and find that and add that to your dashboard. So a couple different steps that were there. Hopefully this isn't anything overly new to anyone that's working through this, but wanted to give a little bit of a set the stage, so to speak, for how patch is looking today. In version 10, we added patch policies, and we'll talk about that, but we made different steps through that, and we wanted to really focus on 3 separate things. So we wanted to make visual improvements, obviously, throughout the entire product to how this would look and feel. We wanted to go ahead and make it more usable and add some just kind of usability gains across the overall, patch reporting aspects. And then last but not least, we wanted to add site awareness to the patching. So we'll talk about these individually. If you haven't seen it yet, this is the same thing, the patch report as it shows under the software title in version 10. So one of the usability pieces of this is instead of going to the software title settings tab, by default, we now, when you go into that title, actually see that list. So just kind of look and feel is a lot more modern, just like we're seeing across the entire interface, and we wanted to add that. Similar thing to the dashboard. Instead of kind of in the 9 series, it's basically take the same thing you see in the patch report and replicate that on the dashboard. We wanted to make that a little bit easier and just kind of more functional on the dashboard when you go through that. So when you actually add that to the dashboard, it's a very similar process. So just kind of going through to that title itself, adding that and putting it on your dashboard. You may have heard in previous conversations, we've said you don't want to move the cheese too much. And that's I was going to say cheesy phrase. I apologize for the bad puns. That's a phrase to say we didn't want to make things overly different for things you're already used to, but just make that a little bit more usable, make small changes instead of significant changes. And so just being able to add that to the dashboard, very similar, very, same workflow you've been going through. It's one less click for what it's worth. but we wanted to make that a little bit easier. One of the usability gains that we want to do a part of that is to make the access to the data a little bit easier. And so the patch reports has all this data and all this information that's there. And we're just going to let this video kind of play, and you can see the different things that are going to be going on. But you can hover over, Dave talked about this, and see the live updating of that donut graph, so to speak. And you can also see all the different versions that are there. And when you click on each one of those, that will bring you right to that software title, and it'll automatically filter on the devices that have that software title. All of those columns are live editable and filterable, and so you can see I've now changed it back to have nothing. I can go in and just kind of search for a specific device, and all of the text will update. And we talked about how the columns now, instead of kind of the new view having to go someplace else to set your display inventory preferences, you can actually do that right from the chart itself. And again, adding that, the same filtering functionality is there, where you can add that and see all the 1013 functionality, or rather devices that have 1013 right in this same view. Patch reporting has had the ability to export since we deployed in 9.9.3 and shipped that, but now kind of adding this new functionality. When you export, you can much more easily make those devices in that list of what you want to see, and then export that to CSV or to tab delimited or comma delimited for the different things that you need. So really just a general kind of usability change to what we wanted to add for the things that you're already able to do to make that report, to deliver that to whoever might need it, to export that data into another tool that you might be using to get aggregate data across different devices, and just have it a little bit more simple. Looks great in the interface, but we wanted to make it easier to get that data out as well. Speaking of just kind of the different areas and ways we might want to use the data, the access to the data, and really in what site administrators have access to different things, that wasn't in the first version, and so patch software titles are now site aware in version 10. And so you can add that. You can see I've got all the different sites for the offices we have at Jamf, and you can add that for your different titles, and we can kind of go through and let our admins look at those reports site by site, or see that same type of data about the overall site in general. So like we said, not a lot of significant changes to the identify piece. There are some nice things that are there and some usability gains, but hopefully not a lot of new different things than what you're used to. We did spend a lot of time over the last 12 months working on the apply piece, and this is where we were talking about what is called patch policies. So the apply piece is our ability to actually, once we've identified a device, take a piece of software and deploy it down to the device that's there. And it's really these three separate things. Be able to do the patch policies. We wanted to integrate that with the new self-service. And we wanted to be able to monitor the progress of a distribution through the dashboard. And so we'll talk about each one of those individually, and we'll start with the patch policies. So I'm a visual learner, and so we're going to go through just kind of a general high level. This is how the flow looks before we actually show it what it looks like in product, but we'll kind of get to both. Essentially what's happening is you've got your Jamf Pro server and you've got your managed client on the other side. And your managed client device is going to be sending its inventory to the Jamf Pro server on a regular cadence. This is, again, nothing new, stuff that's always been happening. At some point, Jamf Pro, with patch policies, is watching that device to see if it meets some criteria to become eligible. And when it does, based on the inventory that's already submitting, that device becomes eligible, and we can actually start doing something with that. Once a device is eligible, we can then deploy the package down to the device. So Jamf Pro is watching the devices based on the inventory that's already submitting, so no changes needed there. And as soon as the device becomes eligible, patch policies is the mechanism that's going to actually deploy that package down to the device. It's called patch policies because it's very similar to policies and things that you guys are already used to. So really not a big change there, and we can show you what this actually looks like in product. So when we're looking at it, we're already assumed that you've subscribed to a title, right? So this is something that you've got in your environment as a patch report. So everything will just continue working, and you'll see these new tabs. The first thing that we need to do before we can actually deploy a package to the device is associate the package itself to the version that I want to distribute. So this video is going to go through and just kind of show what that looks like. But there's a new tab called Definition. And under that, you can see all the different versions. Flash Player is a good example because there's lots of them. But you can see all the different versions that are there, and what we need to do is take the package and say, this is the package that is associated with that version of the piece of software. And so you can see it's using all of the packages that are already in my distribution points and already available, and there's no need to replicate or have two of the same thing. You can use any package that you have. It also implies that having the appropriate version of the package associated to the version in the definition will be important, because patch policies are deploying the exact package that it asks for. And so it's not necessarily doing anything in the patch policy itself to say, is this the right version? So there's a little bit of just making sure we have that there. You can see we've got one associated. You can do multiples here over time. We would expect that you would have 4 or 5 different versions, potentially more, as it's going on and on and on. And there's some helpful things on why you might want to do that we'll get to in a little bit. Once you've got your packages associated, you're basically off to the races, and you can start doing your patch policies and actually deploying patches to titles in your environment. So the easiest one that this is going to go through is essentially an automatic do everything for me. I don't want to ever have to think about this again, and it's a pretty simple setup. We've got the associated packages there, but we're going to go to the patch policies. We're going to create a new one. And you can see this is what that title looks like, and through the beta programs, there's got to be hopefully some things that are not new to folks here. But you give that a display name, just like any of the other objects that you would have within Jamf Pro. Once you've done that, you're going to define your scope. You can choose install automatically. Obviously, the same mechanisms. We'll get to some of the other options around install automatically or via self-service. But you choose your scope, and you save, and everything's ready to go from there. At this point, any device that falls and becomes eligible, if you remember that kind of visual learner thing we had at the beginning, any device that becomes eligible will automatically get this version for all of time. So you don't have to do anything. That title is there. Anything for just like the same kind of automation that you would have with a policy, or sorry, with scope, that eligibility will happen to all devices that are eligible, but not to devices that are not eligible. And we'll talk about that in a little bit and what makes eligibility. One thing that we do want to note is the target version is here, and this is how we know what version of the software to deploy, is you set up that target version. And so here, just within that patch policy, you can see we've got 3 different target versions, and this is actually the 3 versions under the definition tab that we have a package associated to. And so the only ones that populate there are the ones that we have a package, implying if you don't have a package, a patch policy certainly can't deploy a package because there's nothing there, so it only shows that list of what's there. Once we have that target version, the eligibility is really what comes into play, and eligibility is defined by a couple of different things. First, a device is only eligible if it has the title installed, but it's not at my target version. So that's kind of criteria number 1. The second is there's a couple other options that are here. We'll play the video so you can see what these are. One is the allow downgrade. Another is the patch unknown versions, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on. But the text in the middle, right under that target version, there's a few things that are important. One shows OS dependency. There's things like what titles need to be there, and it's really all of these pieces of criteria defined that make a device eligible to get the device, or rather to get the policy to execute on that device. Once you have that, you can view all of your eligible devices within the interface under the Scope tab. Once you have everything set up, you'll see that there's a bar across the top that says, hey, targets will only include the devices that are eligible. And so you can click that and view that. One thing to note is that just because a device is eligible, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's in scope. Your scope and your eligibility is what defines what actually gets deployed. So again, visual learner, so if I have my device and it is eligible, it meets all of that criteria, and so the device becomes eligible and would be green, but unless it's also in scope of that patch policy, it will not actually get the deployment. So when you're deploying your patch policies, verifying both scope and eligibility is going to be a helpful troubleshooting step to make sure everything's going to be deploying as you kind of go through and get used to what's happening there. So at a very high level, that's what patch policies are doing. We'll get into kind of some advanced use of patch policies and talk about some of the other options that are there. But we want to talk about the integration with self-service as well. So we added in the new self-service the ability to deploy patch titles. And really, just like you're used to in anything being available in self-service, there's the install method that's either deploy automatically or make available in self-service. When you're available in self-service, there's going to be new options under the user interaction that allows you to define what that might look like for your users. The display in self-service, and we'll get to what this looks like for the user themselves. We'll show a video of that, but the display name is what the user will see under the Updates tab in the new self-service. The description is the text of that, and the icon is there. So this is customizable per patch policy, and you can have multiple patch policies per software title. So if you have different test groups, if you have different departments that would get different versions of a target version for that group, those sorts of things you can make available different icons or different look and feel and different descriptions for each one of those groups. For the user, when they actually go ahead and see this, we're going to have this play and see self-service launch. Maybe this didn't go, there we go. Self-service launch, and you can see that it's badged in the bottom, and we'll get to that in a second for user interaction. But there, under the Updates tab, you can see the update for Flash Player that we just configured. So again, it's the title of the software, the software title is displayed. The button is the text that we added into that title in the user interaction tab. And then the description is the text that we added. Pretty straightforward, hopefully nothing new and significant, like, well, I got to get used to that. Very similar things that's been available in self-service, just moved over for patch policies under that Updates tab. Now, there's a little bit better control over what messaging we can have with users using the new self-service, and a part of that is because it's a native application and because we're using the push notification service, we can prompt our users a little bit easier. So there's a couple different options. One you can see just says self-service, and the other says self-service with the notification center. And self-service option is just to get the notification in the doc item, to have that badge over the top of it. And then with notification center is obviously both of those things. So when you go through, again, we're just going to kind of show what this looks like for them. But a new device becomes eligible that you saw maybe the icon show up for the doc item and as well as the notification center. And the user can go ahead and launch. And then again, just like we were looking at before, the only differences here is the display text that we talked about earlier is slightly different than the display stuff that we can have show up for notification center. So you can have different messaging there for the users. What shows up in the buttons isn't necessarily what shows up under the updates and notifications within self-service. We've talked about the what's new in self-service session, and you can watch that as well, but see that that text is there and they can actually execute that right from self-service, or from the notification panel rather. So if you have a lot of different ones, the user will just be able to see that, go into that, and execute that policy. The last thing that we want to talk about is now, if your organization is a group where you can, we're going to make this available in self-service, you can be able to use this. At some point or another, there may be some time that we want to say, hey, it's time to do this, and we're going to take over, and we're going to do this. So there are deadlines and grace periods that are defined, and you can define per patch policy again. A few different things that are in here. The first is the deadline in days that you want this to happen. So we're going to make this available in self-service, and if after 7 days it hasn't executed, we're going to go ahead and execute that policy. The second is when that happens, we may want to notify our users to say, this is going to happen, close the apps, and execute this before it's going to happen. It's going to happen in 15 minutes. So that is also configurable. One thing that I wanted to mention about this is you can see the preview message is there. And this is a way to preview the message, ironically, of what's actually going to show up to the user. So this will pop up the variables that are there, the app names, the delay minutes, and the software titles will show the titles that it may need to quit, what it's trying to update, and the time that's there. And why we want to do that is some titles make or take, like Flash is actually the reason we use this example, is it may have to close multiple browsers. And so the patch definition from Jamf for Flash shows all those dependent apps that need to quit. And so this will display, software that, or Safari rather, Firefox, and Chrome will need to quit because of that variable that's there. Very similar user experience around this. The notification is going to happen. They can launch self-service, and they can see that. If the title had a lot more things and we had the notification center there, it would show that as well. The last thing that we'll talk about for patch policies, kind of from a broad level before we talk very specific things, is the dashboard monitoring and what we have there. very similar to what you'd expect, but just an ability to add these titles from a per patch policy right to your dashboard. So you can look at that kind of pie chart, rather, for all of the titles in that site or your entire organization, or you can look at both individually, any number of patch policies associated with that, and they'll organize themselves based on the titles that they have there. So that's that apply piece of the new stuff that's in self-service, or rather for patch policies in version 10. We want to talk a little bit about some of those other options that I deferred and said we'll talk about those later. And this is really the advanced things that you can do with patch policies. The first of which is we talked about this allow downgrade checkbox that's there. And what we want to be able to do is to provide you any methods that we can to lock users to a specific version of a title if that's something that you need to be able to do. So if there's a version that is not yet approved or doesn't yet work and we know that things are there, if a device ever falls into a later version, it would become eligible and thus execute that patch policy if we have the allow downgrade checkbox checked. Some apps, with auto updating, that sort of thing, they may be, you kind of fighting a battle back and forth to it updates itself and that sort of thing. And so there's certainly some other, it wouldn't be all apps a very easy thing to do. There may be other setup that has to happen. But from a patch policy perspective, this is the way to make sure that it can execute that patch policy if it gets out ahead of where we happen. Another thing that we can do is multiple patch policies, and this is really where a lot of the great stuff in patch policies, and it's a new example, I would say, within Jamf Pro to be able to say, this is the overall software title, and then have many objects underneath that, and have this kind of one-to-many relationship of the title itself, and then the patch policies that will fit within that. So the patch policies, you can define multiples. And the reason you may want to do that is essentially, and I think we talked about this in other sessions as well, but to have my approved version for all of my devices. This is the approved one that's there, but maybe we got a new version that's out and I want to test that out and I want to roll that out slowly. I want to be able to execute this for the different devices and say, okay, that's good for this group, now I can add it for these others, and now I've got 20% of my users have that title. Everything's going, I don't have any calls or tickets coming in about that. We can make that the approved and then execute the kind of overall approved version and have that. The great thing about it is because of how eligibility works and the ability to scope is you can have as many as you want underneath that title, and a device can move through that if it needs to based on its membership of a different group. You can have different devices in different scenarios move into one smart group, which would put it for one title in a beta test, but maybe not for all of your other titles. And so you can have, instead of every device, every tester is the same group of people, you can have different set of people, different departments, different cross functions, whatever that might be across the teams that you serve, getting the different versions of the title that's there. The last thing that we want to talk about why multiple is helpful is, so patch policies are here, and this new thing called self-service is here. So with Jamf Pro version 10 and patch policies, you can actually use that to deploy the new version of self-service to your devices. We've added this to the patch feed. It got added a couple weeks ago. And so anybody that has any version of patch reporting can now see the distribution of self-service, which hopefully is pretty bland, right? Everybody's at the new version, everything's there. But as your users are getting used to this tool called self-service that's branded in the way that you've made it, that makes a lot of sense for them, it may still be a little bit different. And so you can use patch policies with that same kind of test group and multiple patch policies to roll out the new self-service to your users. We talked earlier about how patch titles are software, or are site aware rather, and that same functionality goes down to the patch policies as well, so those can be site aware. So we've got the identify piece in 993 and forward. We've got the ability to apply new titles in Jamf Pro and forward, and we're pretty excited about the framework that's there and some of the other changes that we were able to make now that we have those two things. We certainly have a lot of work to do around that. A part of that is we've been talking a lot about the ability to package and upload, and we still want to figure out ways to solve that problem. We have moved around some of the work that we've got prioritized in our backlog to make it easier to integrate with other tools that may be solving the package and upload, but we certainly want to do stuff around that and make that a little bit easier for you. So that's the gist of what we have. We've got a lot of time kind of through the end. I'm not sure how much, another 15, 20 minutes that we wanted to make sure we had for different questions, different use cases. How might I do X with patch policies? And we wanted to make sure that there's enough time for people to ask some questions and have those.
Big round of applause. Big round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we should have 2 mics set up, and we got questions already.
That's the popular side.
Not specifically a question, but I was hoping if you could speak to if any of the API capability for patch management.
Talk about the API for patch?
Yeah, some of the any of the capabilities there.
Yeah, so I'm going to be careful of what I say. So I don't know the overall coverage of API around patch policies that we have, just that we have been cognizant of what stuff we might want to have API abilities through. So that's a nondescript answer, I'm sorry. Gaps that I know that we have today are in the upload of packages to the JCDS and things that we're more making that available. But I think for specific use cases, let's chat afterwards and find out if there's anything that we can help with. But patch software titles are in the API. So patch titles, patch policies are in the API. And then outside of that, the rest of the API that would go around that's there would kind of get into the workflow specific stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Rich jumped the line over here. Go for it. No, you're fine. You did the smart thing.
Oh, talk louder? Well, we'll go over here. We'll get you a mic. Oh, he's there.
Okay.
Never mind. Sorry, go ahead, Rich.
So I wanted to find out about the patch policy updates. Is that still coming from Jamf like it is in 9, or how is that working now?
So patch policy updates, meaning the titles that are available.
Yeah.
So that's still coming from Jamf. So there's 42 titles. There will be a 43rd very soon in macOS. So that'll be another one that's there. We'll maintain monitoring and making those available. So of the titles that are there, when a new one becomes available, it will show up in the feed that you have. And you'll get the email notifications if you have that enabled. The notifications within Jamf Pro and all that will continue to work.
Okay. What's the turnaround for that?
So new updates, I think our SLA is actually 48 hours of new update becomes available. That's now in your patch feed. We have been quicker than that for most titles, but if there's something that you're seeing, let us know if there's not a title, if you know that something's there, and we can look into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You guys will be plenty busy with Chrome, I'm sure, most of the time. So actually, I have kind of 2 questions.
Yeah.
One is mostly about like future kind of updates. One, is there going to be any plan for supporting scripts as opposed to packages? Because I don't have time to update packages, like especially with Chrome and stuff like that.
Great question. So a couple things I'll reference. The first is that, so patch policies is this very purpose-built, specific thing for deploying patches. And we tried to make it as plain Jane as we can and add some functionality separate from policies. And so right now, there's not a lot of overlap, but we have intent to bring those together and add more things. Specifically, scripts is something that's kept on coming up, and then specifying your distribution point or a failover distribution point for that. Right now, when you run a patch policy, it will use the device's default distribution point, but you may want to do that different for varying reasons. So we certainly have intent to do that, and a part of that, yesterday we did a panel on packaging and talking about the Microsoft Updater tool. That is a script executed updater. So if there's more validation for our intent to do that, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So then the other question that I have too is I know that obviously you can make different patch policies and you can kind of enable and disable based off of like date and times and stuff. Are there any plans to allow it to be triggered to just like on a frequency, like, 3rd Thursday of every month? So that way, like my test group goes on the 3rd Thursday, but my production group goes on, the 4th Thursday or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. We haven't had anything written down. Team Argon is up front, and somebody will write that down.
Okay.
And yeah, that's a great point. We don't have anything right now, but super helpful stuff. Yeah,
Okay,
that'd
cool.
be great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just kind of building on exactly what you just said. Right now, we have groups that we are manually disabling from existing policies for like the finance group not getting pushed anything in the last week of the month.
Yep.
Is there going to be that type of scheduling options where just automatically these users fall out of scope of patch policies at certain points?
Yeah, great question. So scope is identical in patch policies as it is everywhere else. So where the ability to exclude or limit to different groups or that sort of functionality is still there, the scheduling of that hasn't changed. But I think, as we kind of look at what scheduling we might want to do, that's certainly a case that we would look into doing that.
Second thing is just kind of picking apart a couple of different screenshots that we've seen.
Yeah.
It looks like on the history tab, when you've done patches, there's not the same reinstall or secondary click button that there would be for policies or other self-service options that you've executed. So I just wanted to kind of ask briefly if that's a confirmation, or is there a way to reinstall a patch? There's lots of, turn it off and on again type of reinstall.
Right. Great question. So patch policies right now, if you look at eligibility and scope, a device that has yet to execute and report back its inventory that it's at that new version will always fall into eligibility and thus the scope, and it would execute again. What we hope, and if you find use cases where we're not missing this, is that that won't be necessary to have to go in and reapply because it had failed. Now, the one asterisk to that is there could be like the distribution point couldn't mount or something happened there where there's a failure retries option for patch management to say, hey, if this fails X amount of times, stop trying it again, and you can configure that. But because of how eligibility would be looking at your inventory as well as the scope, we think we've covered the use cases where we wouldn't have to go back through and execute that again.
So actually, I was thinking more of a manual step. Let's say, for whatever reason, the install of Chrome was successful and patched, but it wasn't working for the end user. Something was broken about it. And I want to reinstall Chrome. I don't want to have a separate self-service option. I want us to be able to go into history and say reinstall.
Do that again. So not right now, but certainly stuff that we can look at doing. There's other, the policies are still there, and that stuff is still stuff that you can execute and use for those types of use cases. Is that perfect? Certainly not, but yeah, we can look into it.
So I have a question on the target version.
Yeah.
I noticed when you define that, you're picking specific versions. What if you add a new version to the patch after that? Are you going to have to go back and reselect that in the target version?
So, yeah, so I'll answer your question, try to kind of get through the workflow. So the workflow is a new version is available. This patch title was the latest that was approved or, whatever. There's a new one that's going to be there. We would have to go back through and say, this is now the latest one that I want to deploy and make available to the devices. So you'd have to go back through if a new title is there and actually change that for the ones that you want to get that. We've got some work logged for having latest version be the deployed one, but that gets a little bit crazy. Yeah, good. That gets a little bit complicated in latest approved may not be the same as latest numerically as they come through, and some work there, but we certainly want to be able to make that as hands-free as possible.
Great, perfect.
Our end state is a new title is available. You don't have to do anything and then say, yep, deploy that, and then everything takes care of that. So that's kind of the world we're driving towards.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So let's say a situation where you are deploying Chrome via policy for them to get it for the first time, and then you update that with patch policies. Are there any plans to kind of tie those together to where that latest version would be part of the policy, to where you don't have to do that duplicate work of manage the patch policy, then go change the policy?
Yes. That's a short answer.
Okay.
So yes, right now, the initial install of the app is still a separate workflow than the patching of that app. And we've heard about equal use cases for why I want those separate as we heard why I want those together. So one of the things that we've heard, even actually just, kind of through conversations recently is instead of linking them inextricably, make an easy button to create the initial deployment policy. Or, hey, I want to care about this, make a patch policy that will keep me up to date on that. And just to make that easier, even if they are separate entities, to make it easier to create the other one. So we don't want to make it so you have to create both and kind of maintain both of those things and want to make that a little bit easier for us.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of like with a new patch version, then just say, make this available to everybody if they want to install it.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, over here. Sorry. I'll let our moderator moderate.
Either one's fine.
Okay, just more of a question about the user interaction. I noticed that in the screenshot that the management action was branded. Now, that hasn't always been the case. This isn't specifically about patch management, but is there a specific OS like versions that works on?
That's a great question. So the self-service branding options, which include brand the icon, brand the name, brand the background, and then stuff within the app itself. So as those are configured, that applies for 10.10 and later. So so all new self-service on all those OSs will get that same thing moving forward. There's a couple things you may have noticed where it still said self-service, but I had Acme logos. That's one part I forgot to brand. Yeah. So that the title itself of the app will also show up in that.
So yeah, the management action in Notification Center will be branded.
Correct.
For those. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. 10.10 and forward is that. And there's, I can't remember the name of the knowledge base article. It's something to the effect of the management, there's levels that different devices are eligible for different versions. And so that'd be the one reference. I wish I remembered off the top of my head. I apologize. That'll kind of give a better idea for who gets what.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, John.
Saving the best for last. Yeah.
I think you may have sort of just answered this, but are there plans to sort of have maybe some additional intelligence behind this is the new version of a title, this is the version of the package for the title, so that you don't have to go in and sort of select each version for each new update to the patch policy? It's a little bit more automated.
Yeah, definitely. So the kind of going through the state that we want to get to is you don't have to do anything. It just happens for you. And, yep, that's the approved one. Everything's there. And as a part of that would be a new title's there. I know that it's version whatever associated to that definition itself. And so the rest of the framework can take over from there. It's certainly a part of that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
4 quick things.
Just 4.
That I can think of right now. One of the previous questions was about associating, this is my new Firefox or Chrome installer.
Mm-hmm.
I've often advocated that the JSS needed some methodology, like you can do in Casper admin. If I've got an imaging configuration, I can right-click on a package and say, replace this in every configuration with the new version. I've often advocated that you need that kind of functionality in the JSS itself.
Yep.
So that allows you to not have to worry about, I might have 3 different policies that install Chrome. I just want them updated with the latest package.
Yeah.
And yes, I know that might cause problems with scope, but we'll get that.
Right. So I'll try to answer each one independently.
Yeah, you can do that.
So that idea of this is all the packages I know about Firefox, and this is the one that I want to be the latest. We talked earlier about where like having a patch policy deployed to latest could get complicated. So it's almost a similar requirement from the backside to say, these are all the Firefox packages. This is the one that I care about. There may be a couple above it, but this is the one that's my latest, and that's the one I deploy. It's a very similar concept to what Chris Lascelles has made with D3, that type of idea. So, yes.
I also want to caution on the idea of scripts. I mean, the script for handling the Microsoft updates and calling the MS update -IA, great. I think you got to be really careful with scripts that curl down a package from a website because you never know what might be in between you and them.
Right.
When you have things like auto package to do code signature verification, I don't think you really want to be careful about curling stuff down.
Yeah.
That's why I like the idea. There is a need to have scripts as part of patch policies, but I don't think it should be you should try to not do the curl approach.
I think we feel the responsibility of like, hey, this is the power that's at your hands. This is great, use it, but this could also be bad. And so kind of just some general warnings around that, best practices, things that, add code signature checking, all that sort of work.
Right. Another thing, question for you about the OS stuff that's going to be built into the patch definition. Is that going to be like 10.13, 10.13.1?
So
sort of,
yeah. So what we're trying to do is build the same reporting functionality that you can have back to 10.9.
Okay, so you'll be showing at least major OS versions like 10.10.1 to 10.10.5 will show up as an available update. Okay.
Yep.
What about other updates like Safari updates or security update for that? Because I think what a lot of other admins would like, I'm guessing, was if you're going to do the update panel and self-service, don't make people go into the App Store as well to apply updates for OS updates.
Yep.
Allow them to show up in self-service as well.
Yep.
And I think if you create, these the patch, reporting, that's also an integral part of it.
Yep.
It's both the user experience and the ability for users to report on it.
Yeah.
Everybody think that's a good idea?
Yeah, definitely. So a few things. So the other apps, the security apps, the Apple apps, like Gatekeeper, Safari's, what is this thing? I can't
MRT.
MRT, yeah. So those apps, we have, one of the things that we've done is kind of focus the team even more on this is all you're doing is just curating apps.
Yeah, they finally have built-in extension attributes for them.
Yes, yeah. And so now the team is basically focusing on that. And we also did the work to separate that from being able to ship with Jamf Pro. So we can actually deliver new apps as, just in time. Everything's ready. As soon as it's ready, it goes out the door, and that would apply to all versions back to 9.3, right? You'd be able to use that. So that stuff is happening. Some of the other Apple apps are the next that are on our list. We've got a longer list than we know about, and this is really I think right now, or last week when I checked, there's 19 explicit feature requests for different apps. So kind of going through, making those, and those will be available. Once that stuff is there, being able to do the reporting on that and all that stuff will just take over, and everything will be much more easy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One last thing, and that is the one thing that this bites me too, because I'll turn on, I'll let Chrome auto update itself. I'll let Flash Player auto update itself. But in the case there was that most recent 0 day, not day 0 day, where we needed to get the Flash Player update everywhere. I created a policy to blast it out on recurring check-ins because I needed to get it on my fleet. Press the red button, get it everywhere.
Yep.
And I would get the occasional patch policy or policy that would fail because the state on the device had changed, but it hadn't done a recon. Do you have any plans to do some more checking? If I'm going to, if you've got a patch policy that's going to update Firefox, before that actually runs, confirms that the version on disk is still the old version or if it had updated itself?
Yeah, great question. So intent, yes. So one of the other thing that's a part of that, I'm going to get to why this is applicable. Patch policies and policies are different right now. It is what it is. One of the other things that this allows us to do, there's been a long time feature request to do differential inventory updates, just the deltas. So yeah, good. So with patch policies, because they're not as complex for all intents and purposes, it's easier for us to do differential updates and do smaller checks like that, which would allow us to do on both front and back side, right? So before it executes, see that I should still happen, and then when it's done, tell everybody that I did it, and be able to do that sort of thing. So hopefully that's not too long-winded of an answer, but that's kind of the thinking behind that.
Great. I'm glad you thought of it.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I think you told me about that, and that's why I thought of it. Yeah.
With regards to the plans to add macOS as one of the patch updates, are you going to be grabbing those from the software update feed, or is that going to require us to upload those packages manually to the JSS, or what is the plan?
So it would still require creating and uploading those packages just like any other package to Jamf Pro and making that available on your distribution points. Making that more mature is certainly a part of that. One of the other things that we don't want to do is make you have to do that when it's already there through the App Store. So an addition of scripts allows me to also open the Mac App Store for this thing, right? So for all titles, including anything that would come through there for OS updates. And we want to bring those kind of two worlds together in that.
Okay, in that regard, could we define, say, the combo update as being the update all the time? So, because Apple releases the usual update, but then they also have the combo update, will take you from .0 to whatever the thing is. Because if we're not grabbing it from the software update feed, I have seen sometimes that Apple will release slightly different versions of the update for different hardware.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't. Yeah, I think that should work fine, and that should be able to, really at the end of the day, where we have today, once we release this to be able to be in the patch feed, any package that would execute just like anything else should run. If that's a combo updater, that can be the combo updater, and there's still that manual effort to, this is the package I want to be this version to get everybody up to this, but we can make that more simple, make that more, easy to get exactly that, so that's what deploys down.
Okay, I mean, ideally, I would like this to just come from the software update feed, since it's there. Because that's what, right now, if my users go to the App Store, they don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. They just go to update, they hit update, and that's it.
Yep.
And that means I don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Bringing those two together is the intent that we've got, the direction we want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the reporting, how does the situation where there are multiple installations of Firefox or Chrome, how does that affect the patch policy and what is applicable?
I'm not sure if I would. So if they're in different locations?
If someone puts one, a lot of developers have different versions of Firefox or Chrome for testing purposes. If we want to, and they'll rename it to something and put it in their home folder, and so then in the MDS database, you'll see multiple com.google.chrome versions.
Oh, right. So if they have multiples, is there a way for you right now
To only manage like what's in the applications folder or where we're
Right.
putting it?
Great question. So in the patch feed that exists today from Jamf, the location is the default location. And so we say this is where that title sits, and that's the extension attribute that's there. That's effectively trying to get the inventory if a title puts it someplace different, so that we can still collect that and submit that back through. So that's what sits today. In some of these situations where, I've got 3 versions of Firefox, one's here, one's here, one's here, can I have patch deploy that? One of the things that would have to be is for you to have a patch definition that says this is where those sit. And the work that we're doing right now is to allow for organizations to have their own external source outside of the Jamf source so that you could do exactly that. So you would be able to define this is where this version of Firefox sits, or this, it would treat it as a separate title for all intents and purposes.
Okay.
And you could have that and say this is here, and then you'd be able to do all the same patch policy workflows for that one separate from the one that may be the default that would come from the Jamf feed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great questions. We're at time, so we just have the time for the 2 more questions, guys.
Okay. Back to the macOS versioning. Are you going to the build number or just the version of the point release? Because we often get
the version number.
Okay, because we often get things like a supplemental update that actually is a different version. This just happened. Sometimes we get forked builds, and so sometimes you have to change, like update your app. It becomes a different app halfway through a point release.
Yeah, Mac OS will be the version number right now, but adding the build number, kind of adding a way for you to see what that is, and if there's a difference, we can look at that and see what we can do to help with that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Hello, this might be a quick question, but I do have a question concerning applications that might have, I guess what would be considered a new version, although as like Adobe Creative Cloud, for example, 2017 has multiple versions, 2018 comes out. How would patch handle the 2018? Would that work as a patch, or would we have to deploy 2018, remove 2017, and scope it like that?
Great question. So there are vendors that will do different things to their version numbers and different, name apps completely different and that sort of stuff. So the identifiers that we have, if the application title comes back the same, that's really, here. So if a vendor changes the name, we would have to treat it as a totally separate thing. That said, if they change the version scheme for some reason, if they add like a letter in the beginning or do something silly or whatever that might be, there is a patch unknown versions checkbox for that sort of thing to say, hey, this one came out, I don't know what that is. And it both covers the case of the definition is it's a really old version that I know about, and also they updated to something that's either newer or I just have no idea what that is because of a version change, and that would execute with that there. So dependent on the vendor, in this case Adobe, if they were to move to a totally different app name that would do the updating of the same stuff, that would show up as 2 separate things, and we wouldn't be able to say, okay, this goes over that in the functionality that's shipping in version 10. But if it's just a version string, but the title's the same, then we could have some methods around that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Great questions, guys. Thank you again. Leave some feedback in the JNUC app. The next session here in this room is all about Jamf Nation at 2:45. And one more time, give it up for John and Patch.